How do you build a sacred community? This is the question that God and Moses considered as the people stood at Mount Sinai. How do we bring these disparate tribes together to help them bridge their differences and become one people, one nation? God answers, we build sacred community one person at a time. In this week's Parashat Trumah, we read, Vaikuli Trumam eit kol ish asher yidavenu libo. Tell the children of Israel to bring me gifts from every person whose heart is so moved. And then a few verses later, V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti bitocham. Build for me a sanctuary and I will dwell among them. God commands the building of a sacred gathering place, the Mishkan. Rabbi Denise Egger explains the building of the Mishkan will force the Israelites to work together in order to fulfill a common goal and prepare for a common future. And how is it to be built? With the trumot, each person's gifts. But God created the universe from nothing. What use does God have for our gifts? Rabbi Pinchas Pele writes, besides the immediate purpose of the campaign to collect the materials for the building of the sanctuary, it also serves an educational purpose to convert the people from passive participants in their relationship with the eternal as constant recipients of God's gifts into active partners. He continues, the indwelling of God among the people cannot take place as long as the people are passive and do not help to bring the sacred into the world. And let them make me a sanctuary that I might dwell among them. My dwelling among them is on the condition that they make the sanctuary. It is precisely the action of bringing the gifts that is what invites holiness into the project. When the Israelites offer something of themselves in the pursuit of sacred community, the community becomes sacred and God is invited to dwell within. Given the importance of these gifts, one might imagine that everyone would be required to participate in such a momentous communal endeavor. But surprisingly, God says, Kol ish yidavenu libo. Every person whose heart is so moved. If the gifts are vital to the project, then why are they voluntary? But it is the fact that they are voluntary that changes the Israelites. These are not compulsory like taxes or tzedakah. God knows that holiness comes when people freely offer of themselves in the pursuit of a common goal. As Rabbi Mackenzie Zev Reynolds writes, Vidabenu libo can also be translated as whose heart incites them. A person compelled by the needs of the community responds to those needs with generosity. We look around, we see what needs to be done, we see what gifts are missing that only we can offer. And this incites our hearts. It calls us to act, to serve, to give. This is what changes us, and by extension, the whole Israelite camp. How do you become a community, asks God? Through a shared building project in which we are bound to each other, in which our communal responsibility compels our hearts. Through building, we become not just a nation, but a sacred community, the kind of place where God would want to dwell. 250 years ago, the founders of this country were asking similar questions about how to build a nation, how to bring together 13 diverse colonies and create a country. They knew, as God knew, that a shared project was the answer, something to which everyone could lend a hand. And the shared project they envisioned was not a Mishkan, but a democracy. And like the Mishkan, a democracy thrives when its citizens bring trumot, their gifts of their heart, their time, their talent, and skills. One of the primary ways we offer trumot is by voting. And like the trumot of old, this gift is a gift and a right, not a commandment or an obligation. There are other countries with compulsory voting, places like Greece and Mexico and Egypt. In Australia, if you do not vote, there is a monetary fine. But in America, we can choose whether to vote or not. And I want to talk about that choice tonight, because I know that not every person's heart is moved by every election or candidate. But our founding fathers believed in the same principle as Parashat Trumah, that the sacredness of the gift comes from the vidabenu libo, the willingness of the heart. And in Texas, we don't make it easy. We do not have universal voter registration or online registration. We have limited mail-in voting available only to those who are 65 and older, people with disabilities, and people residing out of town for the entirety of the election period. And we make you resubmit an application to vote every year, vote by mail every year, which means, by the way, those of you who are 65 and older, if you haven't already applied, it is too late for the midterm election, but you have to, so you have to go to that one in person, and then you can apply for the next elections that are coming up. In Texas, we make it hard to vote. But at least we get a lot of practice. Because in Texas, we vote a lot. Both in terms of the length of our ballots. Texas has the longest ballots of any democracy in the world. That's not a joke. That's a serious fact. And also in terms of the frequency of our elections. Because of our primary system and runoffs, you can spend much of the spring catching up with your local election worker. I've checked, and some Harris County voters are going to be asked to vote in as many as 7 elections between January and June. This is the special election for the Texas 18th House seat that already happened, the primary, the District C special election, the May 2nd uniform election, plus 3 possible runoffs. And at the end of all that, we'll only be a few punches away on our card from a free foot-long sub. If you are committed to bringing your gifts, brace yourself, it's going to be an exhausting spring. And aside from thinking, didn't I just vote? You might also start to think to yourself, do all these elections really matter? Maybe it doesn't matter if I sit one out. Let the people who are really tuned in make the decisions. And who could blame you? It's almost as if the system is designed to encourage you to think like that. But here's something I learned from our member and teacher, the late Professor Bob Stein, who taught me so much of what I know about elections. He said you can understand a lot about people's faith in elections and by extension the health of a democracy from how many people vote. So I want to do an experiment tonight. In a minute, I'm going to do something that I do frequently in services, but very rarely in sermons, which is I'll ask you, not yet, to rise if you are able. But I want you to see the health of democracy in Texas and the places where our gifts might be most needed. And I want to start with some good news. I want to share with you something that I've actually not had a chance to share publicly yet. And I want to look back at the election of November 2024, an interesting place to start if you're looking for good news, but here it is. As a congregation, we like to compare ourselves to the county average in our Emmanuel Votes work, our campaign to try and become a 100% voting congregation. So I want to start with the county average. So, if you are able, everyone from this aisle over, if you'll please rise. Based on my assumptions, that's about 58.8% of the people in this room. That's how many people in Harris County voted in the November election. Now, I'm also curious about sort of what Jews do generally. So from about halfway up, if you all please rise. All the folks in the back, all the 6th graders, all the way to like here, if you don't mind. All right. 71% of Jews voted in the November 2024 election. Now to our numbers. If you will all please rise. Not you. No, you say. Wasn't that good? All right. 82% of Emmanuel congregants voted in the 2024 election. But it's not all presidential elections. I want to talk for a second about midterms. And here I want to thank the organizer and lobbyist Joshua Houston, from whom I learned this. So everyone, if you're able, please stand up. Okay, you are the 22 million Texans who could be voting. That's 18 plus citizens not currently serving a felony sentence. That's everyone. Now, 19% of you, or about who is already sitting, you may sit back down. All the ones who didn't vote at Emmanuel. You. Okay. Because about 19% of Texans are not registered to vote. So they sit every election out. You can be seated. Like I said, the last presidential election was 58.8. So everyone in this whole section, you may be seated. But that was presidential, and that's high. 2020 was the first time that Texas voted over 50% in any election. And in a midterm, in a gubernatorial midterm, is about 42%. 1, 2, 3 rows, you may be seated. If it's a non-gubernatorial midterm, it's 37%. 1 row, 2 rows, you may be seated. And that's until the last 2 midterms. Before that, the average was closer to 25%. 1, 2, 3, you may be seated. Now, we got to talk for a minute about gerrymandering. 95% of the seats in the Texas House are decided in the primaries because of gerrymandering. There are, out of the 150 members of the Texas House, about 4 seats that are reliable swing seats. There may be up to 11 in strange elections, but all the other ones are decided essentially in the primary. So we got to talk about primaries. That's the most important race. In the primaries, about 14% of people vote. The rest of this section may be seated. Now we're just dealing with y'all. Now it's a partisan primary, so 14% divided into 2 parties, it's about 5% voting in the Democratic primary, 9% voting Republican, in the Republican primary. That's not a reflection of the division in Texas, that's just who showed up. Now let's talk about the runoffs. All y'all may be seated. About 6% for both parties, which means all y'all may be seated. If you'll stay standing for just a moment, these 3 people, 3% are deciding 95% of the seats in the Texas House. These folks represent about 700,000 Texans. Remember, we started with 22 million. That's who's deciding these elections. In 2012, Senator Cruz won a runoff with 3.5% of Texans of the voting age population affirming him at the ballot box. In 2014, Governor Patrick won with 2.5% affirming him. 3% of a state, or 700,000 Texans, are driving the policy conversations for the entire state. You may be seated. Thank you. I don't know what we think we're building with only 3% of our gifts, but it ain't a sacred Mishkan. Now, I know it's confusing and hard to keep track of, and I know there is reporting that maybe this election is going to be a little bit different, but that's why that's important. And also, if we can go from 3% to 6 or 10 or 15%, that'll be amazing. But we're unlikely to get to 82% like we did in the November election. And that's part of what our EE Votes committee is trying to help you with. I want to thank the members of our committee who are here tonight. After services, they're going to be standing at the door handing out some postcards with the primary dates because we are in the middle of a primary election right now. There is 1 more week of early voting, and then election day is on March 3rd. You can follow the link on the QR code on the postcards to check out your registration status, see a sample ballot, and find polling places. And I'm not telling you who to vote for because our EE Votes work is proudly and passionately nonpartisan. In the Torah, God is more concerned with each person bringing gifts than with what each person brings. What matters is that we show up. We know it's hard to manage, and the EE Votes committee is working on creative ways to keep you informed. Stay tuned because we're hoping to launch a new text message number with occasional reminders about elections. We started EE Votes in 2020 because people kept telling me that they felt powerless in the face of the injustice and division that they were seeing. Voting is one way we reclaim our power, and we see from this experiment that we just did that there is a lot of power to be reclaimed. I quoted Rabbi Pele earlier saying that God asked for gifts not because God really needed them, but because God knew that bringing gifts would change us. It would make us into a community, a people, a nation. Ve'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. Build for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell among them. In America, our democracy is our sanctuary, and it is constantly being built and rebuilt. If we are to make it stronger and better, make it the highest reflection of our ideals and values, then it requires all our gifts. And if everyone whose heart is so moved brings their gifts, I believe that what we will create will be something truly holy. Shabbat Shalom.